everybody who's joining us on this second webinar hosted by Kratos in association with White Hat. I'm Sean Anstey, I'm the Executive Director for Advisory Public Affairs and PR at Kratos, and I'll be hosting today's session. Not saying very much, we've got an excellent panel to contribute with some thoughts and contributions this morning. So just before we do, I'll do a little bit of an introduction to Kratos, an introduction to White Hat, and an introduction to our panelists, and then we can get into the topic of debate for this morning. So Kratos is a specialist advisory and public affairs consultancy specialising in local governments. We help local government clients to improve, and we also help private sector clients to navigate the local public sector, and we do that from offices in Manchester, Bristol, Southampton and London, and we also do that right now from home because nobody's allowed in our offices, but we serve clients nationally from those locations. We're working closely with White Hat, a tech startup democratising access to the best careers, and they do that by matching non-graduate talent with apprenticeship opportunities at some of the UK's most exciting companies, and deliver training in partnership with world-class content providers through a combination of one-to-one coaching and cutting-edge tech. White Hat offers apprenticeships that genuinely rival the learning experience at elite universities. And it's a fantastic organisation to work with. So we have a panel this morning on diversity, recruiting diverse talent into local government, but I think we'll broaden that into just diverse talent anyway, and what we're doing to sort of encourage companies to think a little bit differently about how they go about recruitment, how they retain talent, and how ultimately they get greater outcomes from their workforce. And so that's the topic of debate for today. And joining us for that is Mitra Jain. So Mitra is the current Group Head of Diversity and Inclusion at RSA and leads on the organisation's diversity and inclusion strategy. Passionate about D&I, Mitra is a firm believer in not only talking about it, but being actionable. And you can see that through the RSA's strategy and making sure that their employees have the resources to create impactful change throughout the organisation. Formerly at DLI Piper in a similar role, Mitra led the implementation of the firm's D&I strategy over helping to develop D&I training for all regions, introducing resource groups and overseeing the implementation of more flexible working policies. So Mitra, very warm welcome to you this morning. Forward to what you have to say. Joining Mitra is Siobhan Randall, who is the Inclusion and Diversity Lead at White Hat, social impact professional driven to innovate and deliver sustainable solutions to create a more equitable and inclusive society, and with expertise in community outreach, diversity and inclusion within tech and education. So again, Siobhan, very warm welcome to you this morning. And then finally on the panel is Councillor Mo Butt, passionate about strengthening relations within Brent's communities to make the diverse borough even more resilient and fairer for all. Mo was elected as the leader of Brent Council in May 2012, and ever since has prioritised creating jobs for local people, investing in affordable housing and supporting Brent's most vulnerable residents. Father of three, having lived in Brent all your life, Councillor Butt was first elected in 2006 as Labour Councillor for Tokington Ward. I've got it right, there we go. First challenge of the morning overcome. And you continue to represent that ward today. And Mo is the Executive Member for Welfare, Employment and Inclusion at London Council. So we could not have a far greater talented panel to talk to us this morning about this very important topic. And to do that, what I was going to do was ask Mitra, Siobhan and Mo to perhaps in introducing sort of what we want to discuss, a bit of a situation analysis on how you see the sort of employment landscape today, what it means for sort of recruiting diverse talent, and then we've got three themes to sort of work our way through. Final thing to say, just before I do that actually, before I forget, is there is a Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Please feel free to ask questions, make comments, provide your observations. We'll try and bring them into the debate at the same time, and what we want to try and do over the next sort of 50 minutes or so is have a really free-flowing discussion between us, and we would like you as participants watching this webinar to join in with that discussion too. There you go. I think that's it. That's the introduction done. I think we've covered all the points. Mitra, I wonder then whether I can start with you, if that's okay, and maybe just well, just on that point, really, I suppose reflecting on where we think we are, what you think the key opportunities and challenges are, and then we'll get the discussion going between the three of us, both the four of us,
Sure.
between the three of you.
Thanks, Sean. So I think, in my observation, we've certainly seen, certainly in the last few months, heightened attention in this area. And, you know, I've observed personally organisations that perhaps have taken very little interest in diversity and inclusion all of a sudden becoming a lot more interested. And if we think about, well, why do the organisations that we are part of, that we aspire to be part of, that we have been part of, why do we not necessarily see the diversity profile that represents the communities in which we operate, or the customers that we serve, or the clients that we're working with? And that comes down to who has been recruited and then who's been retained in those organisations. So clearly there is a big opportunity for organisations to think about, well, who are we bringing in, and how are we bringing them in, and where are we bringing them in from? I think, so in taking my assessment of where we are, we've got the attention, we've got the focus. The piece that needs a little bit more work is a bit more maturity and sophistication about the processes and the way we do this. And I think because some organisations and some individuals have come to the party quite late on this, they're going for more gimmicky or unproven techniques that aren't actually going to have the impact that they want to see. So they're saying things like, well, we'll have blind recruitment because that'll solve everything. I'm happy to talk about that later on in more detail about why that isn't the solution to all the issues. Or they'll see things like, well, we'll have a diverse recruitment panel, i.e. two people who look differently will be completely unbiased versus two people who look similar, and it just doesn't work like that. And what organisations also aren't doing enough of is thinking about, once we hire people, what is their lived experience in our organisation? Because bringing people into an organisation that isn't going to be inclusive, that's going to be hostile, where people aren't going to be valued, where their voices aren't going to be heard, there's less than zero merit in that, because it's really unfair to those individuals. So I think we're on the right track, but this is a critical juncture for organisations to think about, what do you do next that's really going to have an impact?
Nietzsche, thanks very much. And maybe, Mary, if I move through to you then. So some really, really important points there around, you know, recruitment being just part of the process, not the end of it. And, you know, what happens next? How, you know, organisations being inclusive. What's your view on the scenario, on the situation?
Thank you for that, Mitra. I think you've started on the right point. I think the last few months have been sort of difficult, haven't they? Right, but I think we have to acknowledge, right, that there has been sort of a structural failure, right? Not just now, right, but it's put a spotlight. George Floyd, the Black Lives Matters, and the issues about inequality, right, have been spotlighted, right, and how do we tackle some of those issues we're talking about in trying to recruit that diverse talent, and I think it's more about just about recognizing, right, that there has been a failure. If we don't even recognize that there has been a failure, right, we're not even going to be able to start to tackle some of those issues and those problems and the barriers that we face. I think the other issue always has been is that I think when you come across somebody who's different to yourself, right, there's always an instinctive sort of barrier that's always put up, right? How do we break down those barriers? And I think having these conversations is what is first and foremost I think the start of the of trying to tackle the issue, and trying to acknowledge the fact, right, that sometimes the individuals who have come from, you know, from further afield do have something to offer, right? We're living in London, right? I am at the moment, sorry, apologies, right? We're living in London, right? Which is one of the most diverse places, right? And Brent being one of the most diverse boroughs as well, right? And if we're not reflective of those communities and recognizing that the individuals who make up our communities, who are supporting our communities and part and parcel of the structure and the fabric of our society, right? That they are able to actually provide something that enables our organizations to actually become even better and bigger and deliver more for our communities, right? We're not going to be able to tackle those conversations. I think sometimes we also have to recognize, right, that just because someone has come from a different country and the qualifications, the education is probably just at the same level, or it will probably even higher, but it's how do we recognize that fact as well, and we also need to make sure, right, that places like government, right, also recognize some of those failings as well, because we put too many obstacles and barriers in allowing some of those individuals to come into our places of work as well.
Well, thanks very much. And Siobhan, I wonder whether you might pick up some of those points actually around sort of qualifications, around, I know at White Hat you have some fantastic outcomes on sort of diverse recruitment, but can we get your perspective, and then we'll delve into these issues a little bit more deeply.
Yeah, for me, there's kind of two main things that could summarize some like quite huge changes we've seen over a really fast period of time. The first I say is that, like it's been identified, there's been a real shift in the diversity and inclusion conversation. Diversity and inclusion has been kind of growing, and one stat I read the other day was that people with job titles like mine, inclusion and diversity lead, head of diversity and inclusion, has increased by over 100% over the last 5 years. So it's generally been a gradual increase, but we have seen a kind of a real heightened attention this year. I think the thing that's really changing in the narrative is that identification of what is performative versus what is impactful, and people are calling for robust data collection, and they want to see the outcomes of all of the initiatives that we've heard about for some years from different companies, and that's something I really welcome, much more of an outcomes focus to the work. And then secondly, I would say digital transformation. So companies have been kind of forced to almost bring forward their digital transformation plans by years, because there's no choice now. You're working from home, you need to have the systems in place that people can still be productive. And as a result, that opens up an incredible opportunity for both who you recruit and also who you upskill within your organization to future-proof their careers. So for a lot of the kind of careers in tech, there's no reason why an individual has to go to university to get a degree. There's many other ways that they can train and get the skills that they need to enter the workforce, and to enter the workforce in really long-lasting employment that's going to be future-proof. We're in a pandemic, we're seeing lots of people be made redundant, but those careers in tech, we know, are going to kind of have a long-lasting future. So I think there is, whilst it's a really challenging time, there's some really exciting areas of opportunity that we can make a real impact on diversity, especially in kind of the digital and tech environment.
Excellent. And just thinking, if we just build on that point, actually, thinking about, you know, an economy that is repurposing, you know, job roles that are being lost, job roles that are being created. Yeah, how do we use this sort of moment in time to maybe fix some of the things that have been wrong in the past, and actually that progress that all three of you have alluded to around, you know, diversity and inclusion being at the forefront of people's mind. How do we make sure that in, you know, 6 months, 12 months, a year's time, that we're just naturally doing the things that good employers would do anyway? If that's a comment and a question, I suppose, really. And Matt, I wonder whether from a London perspective, so that, and you touched on Brent, what do you think needs to happen to make sure that we really are making progress on diverse workforces?
That is interesting. Do you know, when I first became leader of the council in 2012, or when we took control of the council in 2010, right? I was quite hit by the lack of diversity at the top end of the council and the workforce. Right? I walked into the room, right, and with the chief exec and sitting around the table, right, were 14 other people. Right, and the only black and brown face in that room was myself. And honestly, and that was the time it really sort of struck me, right? That how am I going to be able to explain, how to demonstrate, how to what the issues and the concerns are, if I haven't got anyone, right, who doesn't even represent the community. I mean, in Brent now. The population of Brent is 330,000, and 65%, 66%, right, of residents, right, are from actually from BAME communities. But now, right, 65% of the workforce is now also from the BAME community as well, right? And if you take a look at I mean, where we are today, right, being recognised, I have to get this in, right, as the Council of the Year. But you don't get to be.
Mate.
Thank you very much for that. but you don't get to be, right, the Council of the Year unless you can actually represent and demonstrate, right? So some of the positive things that you are doing, not just for the council, right, but for the community, and you have that representation, right? Because if there is no understanding of the different languages, of the different cultures, the different communities, right, and trying to tackle some of the issues that Siobhan is just talking about in relation to digital exclusion as well, right? Some of our communities are so digitally excluded and haven't had the opportunities to succeed for 2, 3, 4 generations, right? So that's a failure, right? Because we're not able to understand who they are, what their needs are, and those cultural sensitivities as well, right? But being able to tackle some of those issues, right? Giving those individuals the tools, the resources, and empower them, to give them the ability to move through the social mobilities we keep on talking about. But how do we address it? And it has to be, right, at the lowest common denominator, right? And that's starting at, right, to taking a look at the education, the skills, the housing, all that kind of stuff, right, in order to tackle some of those opportunities, right? All of us sitting around this table and the virtual table that people sort of walking sitting around today, right, we have the ability to impact that positive change, right? We have the power within our fingers actually to start that process and of that engagement, that discussion, and having those uncomfortable discussions. If I said to everyone who's here today, go back to your boards, right? Go back to your offices and take a look at the makeup and that diversity. Is it reflective, right? How many would be able to say yes?
Brilliant point. And Mitra, I wonder whether I can just try and be a little bit provocative on this point. So a common retort to the sort of workforces that reflect the communities that they serve is, well, you should employ people who are most qualified for the job, and it doesn't matter. So it's almost presented as an either or, and I'm hoping that you will now give me some comments on why it's not an either or, and actually these two things sit very comfortably together. And I just whether we get your view on that and some of the, what you're doing at ISA and elsewhere to overcome that skepticism, I suppose, around how we go about recruiting diverse workforces that are reflective of the communities they serve.
So we want a meritocracy, right? What we want is the best person for the job. That concept of meritocracy is pretty much a myth, because as Mo has explained there, not everyone has the same opportunities. The playing field is so far from level. We need a whole new word to explain the playing field. And I actually find it quite offensive that we hear this language of, yeah, but it's the best person for the job. Because as soon as you start saying that, you're basically implying a black person can't possibly be the best person for the job. The only reason they've got that job is because you've got some imaginary quota. The reason we see a woman in that senior role is because, you had a target, you had a program, you put on a development program to fix her somehow. And we come back to, yes, I would promote these people, I would hire these people, but the talent doesn't exist. And when I see the talent, of course I'll do that. And my response to that is you're not looking in the right places and you're not looking in the right way. And clearly those sentiments betray how you really feel. You know, we talk about unconscious bias. In my experience, it's often very, very conscious, actually. So let's come away from thinking about that concept of I want the best person for the job, right? Because if I take the person who's had the best opportunities, the best foundations, the best work experience, the best education, the best mentoring, the best sponsorship, the best readiness for whatever this opportunity is, if I analyse who that person is, they fit a very narrow profile. And it's because of all of those underlying factors that have underpinned how they got to this point now. If we're really serious about addressing the systemic issues, then let's look at all of those different factors that mean we have the haves and the have-nots. And actually, just coming back to the previous point around how we're working at the moment, we are, almost all of us are working in a different way, you know, whether it's we're working in a different environment or we're interacting with people in a different way, or we're working different hours, or we're interacting with customers in a different way. But what we also have to do is address some of the cultural barriers and the cultural issues. Culture in the sense of how we work within organisations rather than ethnic culture. If we don't address those underlying issues, actually we're not changing anything. In due course, we'll just slip back to how things were. So we really do need to think about taking hearts and minds with us at this point while there's the opportunity to do so.
Mitra, thanks very much. I thought we would get a robust response from you then, and we clearly did, and thanks for that. Siobhan, I wonder whether you might reflect on that a little bit as well, and have a think about, you know, from a recruitment perspective, when positions are advertised across the scale, really, I suppose, from entry level through to senior level positions, how do we break some of those barriers that sort of not only, you know, companies, it's a two-way thing, isn't it? Companies need to go out of their way to identify talent, but equally we need want to be employees to also try and seek it out at the same time, and to think that some of these roles are for them as well. Do you agree? Or
definitely, I would. Also, my internet connection is patchy, so apologies if I'm breaking in and out. But I'd completely agree with the idea of you can't have a meritocracy in a situation where you don't have equity or equality. It doesn't work there. I would say that you just, at White Hat, what we've done is we've very much changed the definition of what best means. We're incredibly competitive, so all of the organizations we work with, including our local council partners, the talent that we kind of put forward to them to interview really is the best talent. They are incredible young people, but our definition of best might be different than what you see at some of our kind of more elite institutions, but they certainly still are the best talent. And we do that through having a matrix for identifying potential rather than focusing on prior attainment, because we understand that all of the research in the UK for many, many years has shown that one of the greatest correlations to attainment is things like family income. So there's kind of no research to show that it's kind of children born with gifts that other children aren't born with. It's got a lot to do with social mobility and kind of the privilege and things like that. So this matrix for potential very much considers things like grit, resilience, interpersonal skills, and works with the young people to demonstrate that throughout the process. We also have contextualization, which I think is really important when you're talking about who is the best person for the job. You need to be able to understand people's achievements in context. So two of the things that we have built into our platform is academic outperformer status. So you can look at a young person's grades, but you can very much understand those grades within the school that they were achieved. So a young person might have Bs, but they might have been the best grades achieved that year in their intake. And then we also have a contextual flagging system, so that the employer who's looking at that young person's profile can see some flags for different things that we've identified through the research that are barriers to people achieving their full potential. For example, being eligible for free school meals, having lived in a postcode that the government has identified within the 20% most deprived, having experienced time as a refugee, having experienced time in care, having been a carer for a family member yourself. And these things are flagged in our system so that we can understand the achievements we see before us within that context. And I think by challenging your definition of best, that is a great way to start, because you'll start to understand that talent really is everywhere, and kind of as identified, you'll push yourself out of those really kind of narrow confines of what you're looking for. Also, really swapping cultural fit for values fit, I think, is a really important one as well, because with values fit, you're looking for somebody who's going to be really kind of aligned and passionate about what your organisation is going to do, which I think is so important for local councils. But with culture fit, you're asking who is going to fit in. And that tends to be a reflection of who is most like me. And that's definitely not how we want to recruit. So that would be my final comment.
Well, thanks for that. I've seen some questions starting to come through on the Q&A. I'll get to those in just a second. So I just want to do two more comments. So Mitra, if I can go back to you before I go to Mo. Just thinking about what Siobhan's reflected on there around, and you sort of ended with it on hearts and minds and structures and processes. And in fact, in your opening comments, you started talking about some of the things that companies are doing where they might sort of tweak a recruitment process to comply, if you like. But I suppose what I want to try and get to is, how do we bring people, because ultimately there's a lot of processes out there that still require a degree. They still, they talk at this very structured, and making that change is difficult. Yet equally, there is a temptation for skeptics here to say, well, this is just playing to an audience, playing to a debate that isn't really that important, and clearly that's not true. But ultimately, you do have to bring people with you at the same time too. So how do organisations do that? And is there any examples where you can sort of share with people watching? Here's a great company that's sort of been able to sort of successfully just do it normally, as you should do, like recruit diverse talent. That makes sense.
Yeah, so I think, so to the point around the steps organisations that are, so to quote Siobhan, performative, or I think I said in the beginning that they're a bit gimmicky, or they lack sophistication. Sometimes there's a bit of a bandwagon that everyone wants to get on. So, the blind recruitment is a great example of that. A couple of organisations did it. Let's all do that, because that's a great solution. Then we don't discriminate against people in the recruitment process by the A levels that they got, or where they live, or what their name is, because we've removed all of that, right? That's the principle. Let's just take a step back. You're gonna rule me out if you see that my name is Mitra, because that name is from Iran and you don't want to hire me. So I need to remove my name from my CV because you might not like me.
Yeah.
And if you see that I've grown up in Tower Hamlets versus Weybridge in Surrey, you're going to rule me out because you think I don't fit. So I need to remove that for you to give me a fair shot. That's actually what we're saying when we are asking people, or the company themselves are removing that information. There is something in the process that will discriminate against those individuals. Therefore, the solution is to hide it. So if we actually looked at the data, if we actually analysed, well, who are you hiring? Who is coming out of your process at each stage? If we really attended to the important information, we'd come up with a different solution that says, actually, either the people doing the recruitment, or the elements that we're scoring, the elements that we're valuing, the elements that we're not valuing, are disadvantaging some people and advantaging some people. If we really focused on that, we'd come up with a different outcome. So I think it's really important to go beneath the surface of some of these interventions to what we're actually trying to achieve and what's the best route to achieve that.
Brilliant. Mitchell, thanks for that. Mo, I wonder whether we can have maybe your reflections on what you've heard from Sean and Mitchell over the last few contributions, but I also want to come to Helen's question. So Helen's first question, which was reflecting diversity at the top table is also important. So how can councils work proactively to ensure that BAME employees already employed within their organisation are developed and supported to help to be able to take sort of senior position roles within these organisations? And Helen's the founder of the BAME Planners Network. So I suppose there's two points to you. Now, one is just your reflections on what we've just been discussing, especially from your political context, but also maybe just to start tackling that question from Helen as well.
Okay. I think first and foremost, right, it's about just it's about practicing what you're preaching, right? And for myself, right, I have a cabinet of 10 people, okay, and I've made sure, right, that the cabinet, right, is absolutely reflective, right. Just to give you sort of an indication, right, Sharma, right, leads on Sharma Tatla, planning regeneration, right. Promise Knight leads on community safety. Krupa Sheth leads on the environment. Ellie Southwood leads on housing, and Margaret McLennan leads on finance. She leads a budget of £1.4 billion within the organisation, right? And then I've got that's 6 women, and I've got 4 men, right? And I've made a conscious choice of making sure, right, that I'm picking the right individuals with the right talent, with the and giving them the support to actually succeed, right? Because it's no point putting people into those positions of responsibility, right? And saying to them, go and do it, right? But and then not putting in the mechanisms that actually allow them to succeed, giving them the powers, the responsibilities, and those decision-making responsibilities as well, to lead, and that's exactly what we've done on that political level for the cabinet. I've also challenged the chief executive of the council to make sure, right, that the strategic directors, the operation directors, and the heads of service are actually representative of the communities. But that also has meant that we've had to review our employment strategies, making sure the HR departments have actually reviewed their systems, their processes, right, and made sure that any panel is not just an all-male panel. It has women on there, has diversity on there, right, and has those individuals, right, who have been given the training, the resources, and the ability to challenge those stereotypes and some of the failings that we've had in the past as well. And making sure the staff within the organisation actually have the ability to actually raise things, right, through all the appropriate channels. And if they want to come to myself and say, Mo, things are not right, then I've got an open door policy, talking to individuals, making sure that I understand what's happening, what's not right as well. And the chief executive, honestly, we work hand in hand in trying to tackle some of those issues. When recruitment consultants come in, we make it absolutely crystal clear, right, that they have to go out far and wide, right? It's not just looking within their little pockets and pools of talent that they have, right? If they're not looking outside of that pool of talent they have on their books, it's pointless. It's hopeless. They will never change, right? And it's down to individuals like myself to make sure we're changing and challenging and continuing that process of recruitment of that diversity. There is talent out there. Honestly, right? I can absolutely demonstrate that there are good people out there. But I think what we haven't done is explain to them the opportunities that you can have within within local government as well. I think it was Siobhan who it's that purpose, isn't it? It's not about the salary as well sometimes, right? It's explaining to people, right, that just because in the private sector, you may receive a much higher salary package. But within, say the public sector, right, it's also about making sure, right, we're doing what we're actually talking about, right, making sure that equality of opportunity. Siobhan, I think that's the word that was used by yourself last time, wasn't it? That equality of opportunity is open to everyone, right? And it has to start from us, right? And then in London councils, we're now making sure that every single council across London is sharing that best practice, collecting that data, and trying to understand what are those failures within the local government, and making sure that we support one another and putting those processes in place that sort of Mitra sort of touched upon as well.
And Mo, just Ransford, Stuart has asked a question here around recruitment's top table positions heavily reliant on recruitment consultants, and so certainly senior positions in local authorities, you can reel off the recruitment consultants into every single position. Are councils asking the right questions to make sure they're presented with a diverse pool of candidates? And I suppose I'd just tag on to that. Certainly from my experience, we used to get a lot of commentary back that would say, "Oh, we've really tried, but we just haven't been able to do it this time." I suppose how do you fix that?
Do you know, it is interesting. In Brent, honestly, I can show you. I don't just rely upon the recruitment consultants, right? I make it absolutely crystal clear to them, right, that I will set up my own microsite. I will set up, right, my own sort of opportunities, right, to go through LinkedIn. I will pass on that information to my friends, my colleagues, and other individuals I know, right, asking them the opportunity for are there any individuals that you know about? Because I think people like myself and all of us, right, we need to go outside of just those recruitment consultants sometimes, and you need to make it crystal clear to them, right? And honestly, right, that is the one conversation, right? Any consultant that comes into my office, or the virtual office now, right, it's we make it absolutely crystal clear, right? It has to be, right, absolutely diverse, and if they don't know where to look, they are the wrong people, right? And they can't come back in your office again, right? And the questions about how do we just make sure that we're doing it. It's like I said, it is practicing what you're preaching, and if there are sort of things that we are missing out, I've always said I'm more than willing to learn from others, right? And I'm not going to reinvent the wheel again, right? Okay, if somebody is doing something better than what I'm doing, or anyone else is doing, right, it's incumbent upon me, right, to make sure I contact that individual, right, and ask them, what is it that you do? How is it that you've managed to recruit these individuals? How is it that you guys are so reflective of the communities? How is it that you're so diverse? Right? If we're not open ourselves, right, we're closing the door to everybody else.
Sean, can I just come in
yeah,
on this point?
Yeah, of course can. Yeah, absolutely. And then I'll come to Siobhan. Mitch, go for it.
Well, because what I don't want is if there's any recruitment consultants listening into this call and they think we're just going to bash them for the remaining 21 minutes. I think sometimes what happens is the recruitment consultants that we work with, they do exactly what was described at the start of this call. They look around the top table, right, and they see it's very male, very white, very middle class, and very middle-aged. And they think that's what we want. And they think we're being performative and we're saying, give us a diverse shortlist. But we don't mean it. We don't want that diverse shortlist, and we don't want to hire someone who brings something different, because we're then telling them in the same breath that this individual has to fit in our organisation. They've got to be a great cultural fit. And actually they think that we're just feeding them lines. And so when they come back with the slate of candidates, these are all credible candidates. These are great people with great experiences. They've earned their stripes, and they think we're going to be delighted with that list. So this is not just, let's bash the recruitment consultants because they're not doing their job well enough. They actually think they're doing what we want them to do. And bear in mind, they are incentivized to give us a candidate who is ready now, not someone who actually, going back to my level playing field, is however many months or years behind this other candidate, because what the business leaders are saying is, give me someone who can come in, hit the ground running, knows this industry, knows how to do this job. We haven't been interested enough in developing people. We haven't been interested enough in cultural add rather than cultural fit. And the people saying it have been from a very narrow diversity profile where it looks like we're not being authentic. So I think we have to be really clear on our expectations, and we have to meet halfway on this.
Brilliant, Mitra, thank you very much. Siobhan, I wonder whether this sort of ready now point, I think, sort of segues really well into what White Hat's doing. And there's two things really I wanted to ask you. One is on that point, so this sort of growth of your own talent and the support I think that you provide, but also to Mo's point earlier around how do you learn from the best, right? How do you get the private sector, the public sector learning from each other, so that that some of these so that we are making tangible progress, and that things are progressing in the way that we would want to.
Definitely. Well, if I start with the first question around development, I couldn't agree more with Mitra's point. When you're bringing in talent, you need to have that foresight to think exactly how are you developing them, what is their career journey going to look like while they're in your organisation. And at White Hat, we really think about how could we bring a young person in and track their success right through to the boardroom from early talent. So some of the things that you can do is look to your apprenticeship levy and think, how could you use that money? And so much money is going unspent on the apprenticeship levy, which is money organisations can be using to develop individuals within their company, and to think intentionally about individuals who might not otherwise have access to development opportunities. Who is the underrepresented talent within your organisation? Could you utilise your levy to support them? And that can be young apprentices, and it works fantastically for them. We also know apprentices have higher retention when they're within the organisation. They have fantastic organisational loyalty for staying on. But it also can be individuals who might be on the cusp of moving into management, and you put them on a people management program because you've identified that they need that package of support. The last time I spoke to Mo, I thought it was really innovative what he was saying about how he's preparing some of his colleagues to step into senior management positions, and it made me think that yes, you could also kind of complement that with something like an apprenticeship program. So yeah, I think really thinking about when you bring people in, what is their long-term career journey within your organisation so that they can get to that top table, but also looking at who you have and the talent that you're not developing and nurturing them to be on the top table. And then over the long term, that might also decrease your reliance on having to pay recruitment consultants to bring people into the top table because you'd have nurtured your own talent.
I feel like we should show recruitment consultants a little bit of love because we're taking fees away from them and saying what they don't do, but that's not. But I say that in jest. Siobhan,
and there are.
Sorry, go on, go for it. Yeah.
I just add there are some like really fantastic. So we focus on the recruitment services that White Hat offer are very much early talent programs, but we're always in conversations with organisations that really are best in class when it comes to senior hires as well. So you've got software like Rare Recruitment that enables you to do contextualize recruitment for graduate schemes. We'd ask that you have an apprenticeship scheme as well as a graduate scheme because a diversity of entry routes is really important. But if you do have a grad scheme, definitely look at Rare for how you can add that to your offer. There's recruitment agencies like Rubik and Orderless who are fantastic as well for senior hires. So there's all sorts of people in the space. Just take the time to do the research and look at their outcomes. Ask them, what is the demographic of the shortlist that you will provide us? And just like Mitra is saying, be really clear with your expectations.
So Mitra, can I come to you on two questions that we have in the Q&A? So I think they're separate but linked questions. So there's an anonymous contribution which is around council panels needing to be comfortable hiring on potential. So this I suppose this continuation of the point you were making before, be less conservative in looking in applicants' track record, providing that environment to support the onboarding process. So there's that sort of potential onboarding piece. And then Alison Littlewood's just asked around, how do we change our approach to help our hiring managers recognise potential at all levels and realise the opportunities that potential, because there is this conflict, isn't this inherent tension, as you were describing, around we need, you know, organisations are facing tremendous pressures at the moment. They need people to come in and do a good job, you know, on all cylinders straight away, or they think they do, versus, you know, actually, if you just took a longer term view to recruitment, you know, so how do you support employers to do that, and what changes need to happen?
I think the really crucial thing is actually training of the human beings that are involved in the process, and really robust processes in the first place. So I'm actually going to come back to an earlier comment around making sure we don't have two men doing interviewing. It's no difference between two men and two women, two black people, two white people, one black person, one white person, one male, one female. If you look at the research, and don't think about this as like, you know, I'm really unbiased and my mate who sits next to me is also really unbiased, so we'll do a really great job. If you look at the research of, you know, thousands and thousands across a huge sample, the actual individuals doing the recruiting makes very, very little difference. So thinking, if we had Siobhan and myself doing the interviewing, we're going to be more favourable towards a woman because we're both female, versus Sean and Mo. The data doesn't bear that out. Actually, women are just as biased against women as men are. It doesn't matter your race. We're more likely to have preferences for Asian people into technical roles. We're less likely to want a black person in a customer service role. These are inherent biases that we all hold regardless of your individual characteristics. So the crucial thing is training, and not a 2-hour or a 45-minute online virtual, let me do a little unconscious bias workshop, and all of a sudden the biases that I've had for the last 40 years are going to be cleansed from my brain and I'm no longer going to operate in that way. You know, really helping me understand, how does bias manifest for me? How is it influencing my decisions? And what are the steps that I need to take, particularly in a recruitment process where there are a gazillion opportunities for bias to manifest? And then what's the process? So is it really unstructured? And coming back to the social mobility point, and also my thing on blind recruitment again. So if you've removed all of that from the process and you let me just have free reign, candidate comes in, I don't know anything about them, I'll do a couple of things. I'll say to them, oh, have you travelled far today? And the candidate will say, oh, no, not far, because I've just travelled from X location. And I immediately clock, oh, that's the most deprived borough of London, not a good fit for my organisation. Or I'll say, oh, what were you doing over the summer? And candidate might say, well, I was stacking shelves in Tesco. Or candidate might say, oh, well, I had an extended break and I went to Borneo and I was helping orangutans. And so immediately, with my, you know, making the candidate feel at ease, I'm not scoring these questions, they're not part of my structured interview, I've decided who's a great fit for my organisation and who isn't. This isn't my opinion as Mitra Jain saying this is borne out by extensive research by the Social Mobility Foundation that showed when you remove stuff from the process, interviewers will find a way to determine whether someone fits. From what colour shoes they're wearing, to what their clothes are like, to these types of questions. So, you know, what do we need to do? We need really robust training, and we need to constrain wherever possible the opportunities for bias to manifest through this process, and really help the interviewer. This is stressful for the interviewer as well, making a really important decision about who we're going to invest in for our organisation. Really help the interviewer come to the right outcome at the end of that process, rather than the quick, immediate gut instinct outcome.
Thanks for that. Mary, I want to ask you a question which is linked to this. Is given all of that Mitra just said, and Siobhan's said too, and you've said, you know, sometimes companies will get this wrong, right? You know, there's and they may not recruit in the way that we would expect, or, you know, some of these biases will continue to be prevalent for sometimes this change happens. And it's almost back to that hearts and minds point, I think, is, you know, it's very easy in today's technologically connected world to put a spotlight on an issue very quickly. How do we make sure that that we navigate through those choppy waters sometimes? That, you know, if there is something that we've seen that where there needs to be a conversation had, but done in a way that is not going to completely undermine an organisation that perhaps is trying to make efforts. I wonder whether you see that across London or in your role. You know, I suppose really what I'm asking is, how do we make sure that we keep making progress on this incredibly important topic?
I think, you know, the one thing we have to remember is that we're human beings, right? We're not infallible, right? And we will make mistakes, right? And that's guaranteed, right? And I think the biggest thing is, right, is one, acknowledging that a mistake has been made, right? If you do recruit that wrong individual, right, and then it's acknowledging that mistake has been made, and then learning from those mistakes, and then as Mitra was just saying about some of the things that we may have put in place, right, we may think they may be right. Right, we may think, right, we're doing absolutely the right thing, right, and having all these panels and then having the conversations with staff and having all those open doors. They may work, may not work, right? But the thing is, right, I think we have to give some of these things the test of time as such as well, right? In order, because if you're going to have knee-jerk reactions, right, to some of these things, then it's never going to work, right? And sometimes, right, you know, just biting the bullet and going making those difficult choices, making those difficult decisions is part and parcel of that learning process. And once we do that, and we acknowledge and understand, right, what we have done or what we haven't done, right, and then put those processes and systems in place, and to give the trust and the confidence to the individuals who are looking from the outside in, right, that we have learned, and we're willing to adapt, willing to change, right. I think acknowledgement of that is going to be one of the biggest factors of that improvement process going forward.
No, thanks for that. I'm conscious we are now at 23 minutes past 9, so I wanted to give each of you the opportunity to perhaps reflect a little bit on the things. I mean, I think this has been a fascinating discussion, actually. I think some of the comments have been bang on the money, which is totally what we want to see from these webinars. So thank you to the three of you, and hopefully our attendees watching will agree. So if I maybe can come to you in each in turn, I suppose, is there any sort of closing comments that you want to make, and what would your hope be of the sort of months and years ahead? And Siobhan, maybe can I start with you, then Mitra, then Mel will come to you for the final word, if that's okay.
Closing comment. I think I'm feeling very hopeful about diversity and inclusion at the moment. I think once we see more robust data collection over a number of data points and over time, we will see increased accountability, and that's what's going to push us to have progress. If companies are investing money into diversity and inclusion but can't tell you the diversity of their organization, then there's no reason to think that they'll be measuring any impact of that. So I think that the real push and call we're seeing in the sector for data, and many councils actually do this already, I think is a really positive one. I think the kind of younger generation, younger than me, make me really hopeful, because they see diversity and social purpose as a must within the workplace. So I think as they progress through the workplace, we'll see that impact as well. And I think I would just ask everyone attending this webinar to really reflect on, how does an individual get into your company? what are the different entry routes, and could you do something about that to bring in more diversity into your organization of individuals from all backgrounds, thinking about gender, thinking about ethnicity, thinking about socioeconomic background, educational background, disability, neurodiversity, really having a holistic understanding of the different diversity dimensions and how individuals can access your organization.
Brilliant, Siobhan, thank you very much. Mitra, over to you.
Well, I guess my hope is that that I'm redundant and pointless, to be honest, that there's no reason for organisations to need someone like me focusing on the diversity of the organisation, the diversity of the talent coming in, and how inclusive the culture is, because it's just done. It's just natural, it just happens, and we don't need to attend to it anymore. In terms of me paying the bills, I feel quite secure that we're a bit of a way away from that right now. There's certainly plenty keeping us busy. I think I'll just close with a comment that I probably didn't answer sufficiently from some of the previous questions around how do we influence. And, you know, so Siobhan was saying you go back to your organisation and question and test. And some of you may be thinking, in my organisation, there's no one for me to talk to about this, and there's no one who's interested in this. There's always a button to push. And I've seen that particularly in the last few months, that whether it's people don't want reputational damage, whether it's people wanting to be on the right side of history, or something that I've observed for many years working with very senior people in very different organisations. Those people are already successful. So they kind of think to themselves, I'm doing something right because I'm a really successful individual. And so if you're just like me, you're going to be successful too. So I'm not very interested in diversity. For those individuals, I think the most effective button to push is being even more successful. And being even more successful is about hearing that perspective that they never would have thought of themselves, challenging their own thinking. What are their blind spots? There's always a button to push. Just sometimes you might need to take a step back and reflect on what's the most effective strategy to do that.
Excellent advice, Mitra, thank you. And Mo, some closing thoughts from you, please.
I think Siobhan and Mitra have sort of hit the nail on the head. But for me, it's also just about perseverance, right? Look, regardless of who you are, it doesn't matter where you've come from, which education is, what your background is, right? And the thing is, right, that there will be challenges in life, there will be obstacles in life, right? And we have to accept that. But when there's sort of that bias, that division, that sort of obstacles which are there, which are sort of hindering you just because of who you are, where you've come from, or the language you speak, or anything else. I think just making that challenge, and I know, and Mitra just said about there are always some buttons that you can always press that enable that conversation to be had, right? Look, people like myself and all the three of us here, but I think we can be sometimes the conduits, the opportunities, right, for those conversations to be had, right? And every single person who's here today, right, I'd say you guys are the conduits as well, because you've taken that time out to actually to take that interest, right, to make sure you're listening, you're learning, you're engaging, you're interacting, and that's one of the biggest things we can always do, just making sure we're persevering and making that challenge at the right times, and just pushing those buttons, because if we don't do it, nobody else will do it, and I need to hear some of those things. I may think I'm doing it right. Mitra may think she's doing it. Siobhan may think we're doing it right. But you guys, right, are the eyes and the ears, right, that can guide us, right, to make sure, right, we open those doors as well for all of us as well.
Thank you very much for that. So we are at 9:30. I hope everybody, I certainly feel far more knowledgeable, enthused and determined than what I did an hour ago, which was the point, I suppose, of this webinar, hopefully for everybody who's been watching too. A recording of it will be made available and distributed so people can listen again to some of the just frankly excellent contributions that we've had from Siobhan, Mitra and Mo. So thank you for doing that. Last thing to say, that we've really enjoyed hosting this webinar, hosted by Cratus in association with White Hat. Do keep an eye out for our future events, and to everybody who's watched this morning, thank you for joining with us, and to our panel, thank you for being with us too. So enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.